Hello! Welcome back to my channel if you're new here. My name is Mary, and today's video is going to be my wrap-up for the month of May 2022. So, as usual, I'm going to start this with my reading stats for the month, which I have right here in my handy-dandy reading journal. For the month of May, I read 17 books and DNF'd one book. I read a total of 6,582 pages, and I read 5 books physically, 1 book via ebook, 8 books via audiobook, and 3 books using a mixture of something in there. For ratings, I gave 1 2-star rating, 6 3-star ratings, 6 4-star ratings, and 4 5-star ratings. I did not read any brand new books to me. I did read 2 books that I previously owned, and I got 15 books from the library. I read 1 middle grade in the month of May. I also read 4 YA and 12 adult books. I read books by 9 female authors, 6 male authors, and 1 non-binary author. I read 14 books by white authors and 2 books by black authors. I did read 1 book published in 2002, 1 book published in 2007, 1 book published in 2013, 3 books published in 2014, 1 book published in 2016, 1 book published in 2017, 1 book published in 2018, 3 books published in 2019, 2 books published in 2020, and 3 books published in 2022. I read 1 romance book. I read 7 fantasy books. I read 2 mystery thrillers. I read 2 historical fiction. I read 1 horror novel. I read 2 contemporary works, 1 general fiction book, and then 1 nonfiction book. And then as far as country of origin, I did read from authors from the United States, England, Wales, and Trinidad and Tobago. Tobago? I'm not sure. But 4 countries. So not too bad. And now I'm just going to do what I normally do. I am going to be getting ready during this video, so I'm going to remove my glasses so I can do that. And then I am just going to be talking about the books in the order in which I enjoyed them. Let me move this a little bit. Hopefully that's okay. I'm not going to focus too much on what I'm doing to get ready because I'll have the products listed down below, but this is not primarily a makeup channel. I just think this is a fun way to do wrap-ups. So also, if you can see my dog's kennel, I have moved it right here. That's what this is. And he is currently right there, if you can see him. I don't know if he's like fully visible or not, but we are in my bedroom and his kennel is usually where the camera is. So I've moved it for this video. So I'm going to start by talking about the book that I DNF'd, which was The Wolves at the Door, The True Story of America's Greatest Female Spy by Judith L. Pearson. I had an ebook from this. I had an ebook of this from my library, and I just didn't really get along with the writing style. So this is a nonfiction book about a female spy during World War II, and frankly, I just didn't feel like it was well written. My sister recommended this book to me. I think I would have liked it more if I had an ebook or an audiobook of it and I didn't have to physically read it, but for whatever reason, I just could never really get into it, so that's the reason I DNF'd that. There's nothing wrong with the book per se, and I think if you were like really interested in the topic, it might be interesting to you, but it just wasn't super interesting to me. I'm going to go ahead and do my eyebrows really quick so I can just get that out of the way, and then we can move forward. So the book that I liked the least this month, I'm really disappointed by, and it's actually, I did a vlog while reading it, which is part of the reason it was very disappointing. I wanted to DNF it, and then I didn't. I pushed through, and I'm not upset that I pushed through, but I just didn't love it. It was Devil House by John Darnielle. I will link the vlog where I read this for you somewhere so you can watch that if you are interested. But the thing with this book is it just like was all over the place, and it's marketed as a horror. I think it's much better thought of as like general fiction, and it's essentially following this guy who is a true crime writer, and he buys a house that a horrible crime happened in because part of his process is like going to the original crimes. But the problem with this book is it did not stick to the brief for me, or it didn't stick to the brief as I wanted it to be, I guess. I wanted this to be a book about a guy who was writing a true crime thing. I wanted spooky stuff to happen in the house. I sort of thought that there might be some like ghostiness happening. No. I also kind of wanted it to be like much more or much less about him as a writer and like other things that he's dealt with, and more about the actual like crime that he's supposed to be writing it about. I felt like it was just not scary. It wasn't horror. It just was like a lot more, I guess, a lot more about his experience as a true crime writer. And on that front, I think the author did a pretty good job of explaining, like, or writing the story in a way that was, like, talking about how victims feel. He switched perspectives kind of a lot to, like, second person, talking about people that he had written about previously, or talking about, like, the family members, but writing it as if the reader was those family members or the person that he had written about previously. So I don't know. I think if you know more about what this book is about, you might enjoy it. I just think it wasn't what I was looking for, and therefore I did not enjoy it very much. But I will, again, link the vlog where I talk about this in more detail, because obviously I had a lot of thoughts, and I will link that for you if you really care about this particular book in my review of it. The next thing, I think a lot of you are going to be disappointed in. This is my first 3-star read, and it's here because it wasn't bad, but it was just okay for me. And that is All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr. Which, you know, was not my favorite thing that I read. Obviously, I gave it 3 stars. I didn't think it was bad, but it just didn't really grip me. I've talked about this before. I don't know if World War II fiction is just not really for me, or just historical fiction in general is not really for me, but I've read a couple of historical fictions here recently that were popular that I just did not like. I like this more than I like The Nightingale. I'm sure you'll be glad to hear. But this is another one of those, like, much loved books that I just think maybe historical fiction's not for me. But this one follows a girl named Marie Laure who is living in Paris during the Nazis' occupation of France with her father. She's blind. And so it's a lot about her, like, her and her father moved to the north of France with some, like, extended family members of hers, and she has to, like, relearn how to be around a city because her dad builds these models for her to show her where to go, and so it, like, helps her because she can't see. And that part was really interesting, but it just, I feel like this book was just too long. We also get the perspective of a boy who gets recruited to the Nazi youth, which, as we know, I don't love the good Nazi trope. I just don't enjoy it. I don't really, I understand the concept of, like, showing people as humans and not, like, bad and good, or, like, good and evil, but it just didn't work for me for whatever reason, so I just wasn't a super big fan of that one, unfortunately. But I did think it was well written, and I would read more by this author, which is why I gave it 3 stars. I wasn't, like, totally disinterested in it, but I just also wasn't that, like, enthralled. I didn't feel as attached to the characters as I feel like I would have liked to for a story that was supposed to have the amount of emotional impact as this one I felt was supposed to have. It just didn't happen for me. The next book I'm going to talk about is another fan favorite, so don't hate me, but A Court of Wings and Ruin by Sarah J. Maas. I don't know if I need to just give up on Sarah J. Maas and just assume that I have, like, run my time with her. I don't know. So this is the 3rd book in the A Court of Thorns and Roses series, which is, like, following Feyre, and she's this girl who is human, but she gets swept up in the Fae thing, and there's, like, a love triangle thing going on. There's all sorts of stuff. It's very YA. I liked the 1st book in the series the most out of all of them. I felt like it was the most cohesive plot for me. The 2nd and 3rd books start to sort of follow this, like, war between Fae and humans, and I just lost interest in it, frankly. So I don't like Feyre that much as a character. I don't really love her, like, romantic story. A lot of people are, like, really attached to the couple in this book. I didn't care about them very much, so for me, it just wasn't really, like, the best. It's just not my favorite series. I do want to read, the next book is Court of, I don't remember what it's called, but it's the newest one that came out last year, I think, or 2 years ago maybe, and it follows Feyre's sister Nesta, and I'm much more interested with what's going on with her, but I've also heard it's much more character focused and, like, slow, and I don't know if I'm gonna love that either. So, we'll see. I do plan on reading it eventually. A Court of Silver Flames, maybe, is what that one's called? I don't remember, but I do have plans to read that at some point. It's not, like, high on my priority list as of right now. The next book I want to talk about is The Hidden Girls by Rebecca Whitney, excuse me. And this is a mystery thriller about a woman who is suffering from postpartum psychosis. And as a part of her psychosis, she starts hearing things and no one believes her. At the beginning of the book, we learn that She has previously had an episode. She's now being medicated for her psychosis. But she used to think she could hear her dead sister talking to her through the walls. And so her husband has sort of lost faith in her. She's sort of lost faith in herself as a mother. She doesn't know how to be a parent to this child that she's supposed to love unconditionally, but she's going through postpartum depression and psychosis and stuff. So obviously I've never experienced that, but it was really frustrating to read about her trying to advocate for herself and not being very good at it, and no one believed her with anything that she said. She even had like a neighbor friend who wound up not being that good of a friend, and it was just like really frustrating to read. I did really like the ending of this book. I was gonna give this book 2 stars because I was so like annoyed with it. It got boring because it's just very like dull. Every day these same things happen to her. But the ending it like made it worth it for me. So I don't know if there could have been some editing in the middle that would have been better. But I do think it was like a 5-star ending, but like a 2-star book. So I settled on a 3-star because I don't know that I would really recommend this to people unless that's something that you're like really looking for. But I do think it's an interesting subversion on the like unreliable narrator trope because you don't know if she's reliable or not. There's a lot of thrillers, domestic thrillers in particular, but usually they involve like alcoholism or like pills, which is why you can't remember things. But for her, it's that she actually was suffering from this like postpartum psychosis thing, which I'd never read about before, so I thought that was pretty interesting. The next 3-star that I had is the second book in the Suki Stackhouse series by Charlaine Harris. I read the first one of these in a vlog, and I will link that for you. It's the vlog where I read books from Arkansas, which is where I currently live. But this series is a paranormal romance, and it's what the TV show True Blood is based on. It's about this bartender in Louisiana named Suki Stackhouse who works at this bar and restaurant, and there's sort of all these paranormal creatures that come around. But in this world, they know that vampires are real. Like, vampires have come out of the woodwork and be like, hey, we exist. And she meets this vampire, Bill, and gets involved with him, and they have like a romantic relationship. These books are just fun. I enjoyed them. This one, she goes, as the title would imply, living dead in Dallas. She goes to Dallas, which is where I'm from, so that was really fun. But she goes there for like this vampire, not convention, but she has to like help the vampires in Dallas sort out this problem that they're having. So they're very episodic. They're fun books. I had a good time reading this one. So that's my review on that. I own a bunch of them, so I probably will continue to read them. The next thing that I read was I Wish You All the Best by Mason Deaver. This is the non-binary author, and this is about a person named Ben who comes out to their parents as non-binary, and their parents kick them out of the house, and they go to live with their sister, who they have not seen in like 10 years, because their sister also left the house. And it's just about them sort of moving on. I liked this book. I don't think I'd ever read about a non-binary character before, and I really liked that it was by a non-binary author, so it feels very, like, I don't know, realistic to me. But also, the things that I disliked about this book are the things that I dislike about most YA when I have, like, qualms with them. And it's that, like, the characters, there's so much convenience in the plot and, like, the conflicts, and I feel bad saying that, but it did feel very convenient at times. Ben, the main character, has a romance with this boy from Ben's school, and there's like that whole thing going on where Ben can't tell if the guy likes him or not, even though I was reading it and I was like, obviously he likes you. I don't know how to explain it, but so that was, I mean, it was good. It was cute. I didn't love it. I didn't hate it. 3 stars. The next book that I'm going to talk about is When You Get the Chance by Emma Lord, which is another YA book. I read this in the same blog that I read Devil House, so I will link it for you. I actually finished this while I was in Seattle, so yay. But this book is about a girl named Millie Price who, she lives in New York City and she wants to be an actress, and she's about to be a senior in high school, but she got into this program that is like an accelerated study program for theater people, and it's in Los Angeles. So she's trying to convince her dad that she should go there. She's never met her mom, and then her dad basically says no, and so she decides she's going to find her mom to get parental permission to go to this college program, but also she's never met her mom. And then what ensues is basically Mamma Mia, but gender swapped. So she's looking for her mom instead of looking for her dad, and she's going all through New York to try to find her. It was fun. It does require a bit of like suspension of disbelief, if you will, but I had a good time reading it. I didn't think it was great, but I didn't think it was bad. And there's also a cute little like romance between Millie and this boy, Oliver, who goes to her school. And it's like hate to love because they really don't like each other, and then, but do they really like each other? You know, it's one of those. So it was fun. I didn't hate it. I didn't love it. 3 stars. The next book that I want to talk about is When We Were Birds by Ayanna Lloyd Banwo. And this is a Trinidadian-inspired fantasy set present day, but it is about these two characters. We have two perspectives. One of the characters is a guy who is Rastafarian, and as a Rastafarian, they're not supposed to, like, be around death, apparently, and he can't find a job, so he ends up getting this job at a funeral home or, like, a cemetery, digging graves. And his mom doesn't like this because it's, like, against their religion to be around death like that, but he does the job anyways because he needs a job. And he has this, like, vision almost of a woman. There's something with, like, they both have a connection to death because he works in the cemetery, and this girl, the other main character, is a like, descendant of, not witches, I don't know how to explain it, but they, like, can communicate with the dead. That's, like, her family's whole thing. The women in her family can communicate with the dead. So when the matriarch of her family dies, she inherits the gift and starts communicating with the dead, and then she and this guy sort of bond from afar, and then they meet over the fact that she can communicate with the dead. I'm doing a really bad job of explaining this because I thought it was kind of confusing and I read it a while ago, but I do think it's really, really, really well written. And I think if you seem interested, or if it sounds interesting to you, I think you would probably enjoy it. I will say it's written in dialect. So if that's hard for you to read, it's hard for me to read. I recommend the audiobook because then you can hear it, and that, for whatever reason, is easier to me than, like, reading it and trying to, like, struggle through the words. The next book is another World War II historical fiction that I gave 4 stars, and that is The Things We Cannot Say by Kelly Rimmer. And this is historical fiction, but it has 2 timelines. So the one timeline is present day, and the second timeline is the past during World War II in Poland, I think. And it's about this woman trying to leave Poland with her fiance. I guess she's, like, a girl when the Nazis first invade, and it's about her trying to get out of Poland. And then the present day timeline, this woman has a son who's severely autistic and nonverbal, and so because of that, she always communicates with him using an iPad. There's an app on the iPad where he can, like, make words, and that's how they can talk to each other and communicate. And then her grandmother gets into some accident, and she becomes dependent upon the same iPad technology that the woman's autistic son is dependent upon. So it's a lot about this, like, woman dealing with, like, her family life, so there's a lot of stuff with that. So if that's not really your thing, then I don't recommend it, but I think that maybe that is my thing. I don't really know. But then her grandmother is from Poland, and she has to go back to Poland and figure out why her grandmother has, like, these missing pieces to her life, and so she has to go back to Poland and figure them out. I'm sure you can see where this is going, but I'm not going to spoil it for you in case you can't. But I really enjoyed that book. I had a really good time. It made me cry. But again, World War II historical fiction is just not my favorite thing. But I did enjoy that this one was not Nazis occupying France, because I feel like that's what they're all about, and I'm bored of it. I'm sorry if that's, like, bad. But I just feel like I've heard that story so many times that it just no longer really piques my interest. The next book that I want to talk about is the 3rd book in the Percy Jackson and the Olympians series, The Titan's Curse. And I have been trying to reread this series for quite some time now. I started it over a year ago, and I'm still only 3 books in. But these books are fun. They're about this boy, Percy, who in the first book finds out that he is actually a son of Poseidon, which means he's a demigod, which means he gets to go to this place called Camp Half-Blood. And that's where people who are half-gods, half-kids go. They are, like, being taught how to defend themselves against monsters, and they always have to go on these quests. And this one is no different. They go on a quest, and it's just really fun. They're making a TV series out of this, which I'm really happy about. But I do want to finish the books before the TV show starts. And I also would like to read, like, I think there's 2 other series that touch the Percy Jackson series, and I would like to read those as well. So I always have a good time reading these. This one I gave 4 stars instead of 5, and I think it's because I'm losing the nostalgia factor for these. The first 2 I remembered vividly when I was rereading them, and it was so much fun to, like, relive that. This one I did not remember as vividly, so I feel like I didn't have as strong feelings about it, if that makes sense. But I am hoping that I will have stronger feelings about the 4th and the 5th. But we'll see. But again, 4 stars is a good old time. The next book that I'm going to talk about is It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover, which I did read for a dedicated vlog, so I will link that for you if you want to see it. But this is I feel like this was pitched as a dark romance. I don't really feel like it's a romance at all. It's a story about domestic violence. So it's about this girl who, her dad was really abusive to her mom, and she always lived with that. And then she meets this guy, Ryle, and he starts out being like the perfect husband for her, but or partner for her, not husband, whatever. But he quickly starts to like become abusive the way that her dad is, and it's just her struggling with that. So if you can't handle that, I don't recommend reading this one, frankly. But if you can handle it, I think it does a really good job of exploring the like societal concepts about like, well, why wouldn't she just leave and stuff like that. It does a really good job of exploring all of that, and also of blaming women when they're the ones being abused, and we should be blaming the husband, but for whatever reason, like, especially if the woman is a mother, we blame her for keeping your kids in these situations instead of blaming the husband, who is the father, presumably, for, like, putting them in those situations. So, I thought that book was really, really well handled. And again, I think if it's a subject matter you're interested in exploring, I think it's a good book to read for it. The next book that I gave 4 stars is one that I was so conflicted about when I first finished it. And it's Monday's Not Coming by Tiffany D. Jackson. This is my first Tiffany D. Jackson. I definitely want to read more from her. The ending of this book kind of pissed me off. I'm not going to lie to you. So this is about a little girl who, I think she's in junior high. Her name is Claudia. And her best friend Monday doesn't show up for school one day. And no one seems to be worried about this except for Claudia. And she keeps reaching out to the different adults. She reaches out to like the principal at her school, teachers at her school, guidance counselors, and then she reaches out to the police, and no one will do anything. She even goes to the girl's house to try to find her, and she just doesn't know where her friend is, and no one's taking her seriously. But this book's ending, I'm not going to say anything about it, really. If you've read it, you know. Let me know, did you like the ending? I feel like if I had read more closely, I would have liked the ending more. But because I listened to this as an audiobook and I wasn't expecting the ending in any way, I can't verify whether I think it was well done or not. So, food for thought. But I did really enjoy the book. Like, the whole experience, it's really well written, and it's, like, honestly, like, a really heart-wrenching story. So, I do recommend it. I do recommend it. There's that. Now I'm going to talk about the 3 books in the Cosmere that I read this month. I read 2 novellas and 1 full-length novel in the Cosmere. If you don't know, I'm trying to read Brandon Sanderson's entire Cosmere in chronological order. Not chronological order. I always say that. In publication date order, which means I'm going through from the first one he published all the way to when I catch up, which will hopefully be some point next year. I think I did the math, and I should catch up next summer, unless he releases like 6 new things, and then I'll be behind again. But I'm reading 1 per month, or I'm trying to, but I caught up in May because I fell behind the other months. So, the 4-star one that I read was a novella called Sixth of the Dusk, which is actually set in a world that has not yet been explored by the Cosmere. He said that he plans on writing other things in that world, but he hasn't as of yet, as far as I know. I don't know. But it's basically set in this world where people are trappers, and the trappers live in this like forest that's really dangerous on an island. And our main character lives on this island. And on the island, there are these birds that have special abilities, and there's a girl who comes to the island trying to figure out why the birds who are from the island but raised off the island don't have these abilities, whereas the birds who are raised on the island end up with these abilities. And that's like the premise of the book. Goodreads description mentions that it showcases a society on the brink of a technological change, which is part of the novella, but I don't feel like that was mentioned until like the very end, so maybe that's not a spoiler since it's right there, but yeah. It brings a lot of really interesting questions to the Cosmere, I thought. So I did enjoy that one, but I didn't like love it as much as I've loved other stuff. Like the next one, the next one I'm going to talk about, I think is my favorite novella / short story that I've read by Brandon Sanderson so far, and it is The Shadows for Silence in the Forests of Hell. And it's again set on a planet that we've never, or like in a world that we've never seen before, but he's planning on doing more work with. And this one follows a female assassin who runs an inn, and or a female bounty hunter, I guess. She runs an inn in this, like on the edge of like the town and the like dark woods. And so lots of people who are bad, who have bounties on them, come through her inn, and they don't know that she's the one who is the assassin. And then she like follows them out and has to like kill them and trade them for money. This one is so interesting, and it has these things called shades, which are attracted to people who spill blood and fire. And then the shades go into a rage, and they like, I don't know, they almost like dementor you. Like they like suck out your soul and like mess with, like shrivel your body. It's like really creepy. So I really, really liked this one, and I highly recommend it if you've not read it already. And then the full-length novel that I read was Words of Radiance, which is the second book in the Stormlight Archive, which is again in the Cosmere, and it's basically like giant swords are magic and they're made of shards. That's like the magic system, but there's also like other magic that's undisclosed. These books are so long, but they're so good, and they're very character driven, but also very plot heavy. So I find that it's the perfect marriage of fantasy for me. Personally, I really enjoy these books. So I really loved that book as well. There are characters in the first book that I did not like very much. That by the end of the first book, I was sort of like, okay, yeah. And then in the second book, the whole time I'm like rooting for them. So that's a plus for me. Then the next, that was the first, those were the 5 stars. We're starting the 5 stars. Shadows in the Forest of Hell. What is it called? Shadows for Silence in the Forests of Hell was my first 5 star that I talked about for reference. This is I'm about to talk about the memoir that I read. This is the saddest book that I think I've ever read in my entire life. It's called Once More We Saw Stars by Jayson Greene. And it is about it's the memoir of a man who lives in New York City, and his 2-year-old daughter dies in a freak accident. Something falls off the side of a building, I think, like a brick, hits her in the head, and it kills her. So this book is divided into like several parts. The first part is like explaining, not even explaining, it's like going through how that happened, what happened, being at the hospital with this like child, all of that stuff. And then it talks about like grief moving on. They had to move house, and then like his and his wife's decision to have another child is part of the book, and like reconciling your dead child with your living child. Again, this was a like extremely difficult book for me to read. I listened to it as an audiobook, and Jayson Greene reads the audiobook, and boy, when I tell you, I sobbed the whole time. So good. It handles the topic of grief, I found, very well. So if that's something you're looking for, I think this is a great option. And it was just such a good book. I really just felt so like heartbroken by the story, which, I mean, I don't know how you could not, but so good. Highly recommend, highly recommend if you can handle it, because it is a lot. And the last book that I'm going to talk about is my other 5 star, and definitely on my favorite list. It's definitely on my list of favorite books of the year so far. I absolutely love this book, and it came out of nowhere. I think I requested that my library buy it, which is why I was on the holds list, but it came in as a hold. I got it. I almost didn't read it because I was worried I wouldn't have time, and I'm so glad that I did. And that is Love and Other Thought Experiments by Sophie Ward. This was nominated for a Booker in 2020, I think, or longlisted for the Booker. I don't know if it made the short list. I'm really not sure. I don't usually keep up with prizes like that, but this book, y'all, it was incredible. It's about this, I don't even know how to explain it. So each chapter, there's like 10 chapters from 10 different points of view, and it follows like the same type, like they're all connected, but you don't necessarily know how they're connected the whole time, if that makes sense. But the first perspective, that is what you're told about, is the perspective of these 2 women who are in a relationship with each other, Rachel and Eliza, I think their names are, and they are trying to decide whether they want to have a baby or not. And they're like talking about that, and then one night Rachel thinks that an ant has crawled into her eye, and like she can't get the ant out of her mind. And then the story kind of goes from there in that perspective, and then all of the other perspectives like connect with it. This definitely is a very speculative book, which I was not expecting going into it, but I absolutely loved it. And my favorite perspective was the perspective of the ant that crawled into Rachel's eye. That was the moment that I knew that I was going to love the book. Like, I think it's the 4th perspective you get. And once I got that perspective, I was like, okay, yeah, this is about to be a favorite book. Something about it was just so like mesmerizing, and it was funny, and it was sad, and like it kind of goes off on, I'm going to line my lips first and then I'll talk. It kind of goes off in like a weird direction, but if you're down for weird, I think you would like this. It's kind of categorized as short stories on Goodreads. I don't think that's correct. It is a novel. And it does have like one fluid line running through it, but I loved it. When I tell you that like I am obsessed with this book, I want to buy it, and I want to own it, and I want to give it to everyone I know. So, that's it for that. I'm gonna go ahead and do my hair, and then I will pop back on to do the outro. Okay, that's it. Those are the 17 books and 1 DNF that I read in the month of May. If you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. If you would like to, you can also subscribe to my channel because I do post 2 videos every single week. Well, I do try to post 2 videos every single week. I post as often as I can. And if you made it to this point in the video, leave me an ant emoji in the comments down below. Don't forget to let me know down there as well if you've read any of these books and how you felt about them. And I'll see you in my next video. Bye!